Hello and welcome to my review of the Adeptus Custodes Codex. It's right here. Here are all of the other codexes I'm yet to do a review on. And yes, that does include Codex Space Marines, which was my first 8th edition codex. Now, I did actually manage to squeeze out a review of the Codex Death Guard, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and I'll love to give you reviews of all of these books you see here as soon as I possibly can. My main goal is to cover at least one of these books every week in a review, and that's for a number of reasons. I think for the next couple of months or so we're not going to have much in terms of 40k releases. I think we've got Tau next, which I won't be covering on the channel. We've got Necrons and we've got Dark Eldar or Drakari. I'll try and cover Necrons. I've always been interested in them, and the models have definitely grown on me, a little bit like Tyranids in a way. So I'll try and cover all of these over the next few months. But in this video I'll be reviewing the Adeptus Custodes Codex. So like all of the other codexes in the 40k and Warhammer Age of Sigmar game systems, this book will cost you £25, with the exception of the Space Marine Codex, this thick one here, but then again this one is over 200 pages. So £25 is the norm now for a hardback codex, and I'd much rather have a £25 hardback than a £20 softback or paperback. So this is the codex itself. It came out in February. Their first debut into Warhammer 40k game-wise was with the release of the Burning of Prospero boxed game set that had Thousand Suns, Custodian Guard, Sisters of Silence and Space Wolves, and that came out in November 2016. Seems like an age ago now. And then over the course of a few months they started releasing more and more Forge World models, everything from the Dreadnoughts to the tanks, up until the summer of last year, in fact. I think it was August, when they released the huge super heavy flyer for the Custodian Guard. Anyway, a few months after its release as a boxed game, they released a Talons of the Emperor set, which just had a standard squad, which is just the 5, Custodian Guard, a Land Raider, a Dreadnought, a Rhino, and a squad of Sisters of Silence. With that Talons of the Emperor set, which I think was about £100, might have been 150, you got these two mini codexes for 7th edition rules. So they're a very new army, and it's nice to see them get the 8th edition updated rules, you know, so close to them being released. You've got this book here, which is the Adeptus Custodes sort of 7th edition codex, which has, I think, 3 data sheets. That's it. Just your Guard Squad, your Venerable Dreadnought, and your Land Raider. Still has the Aegis of the Emperor, but it has all the older sort of clunky rules like the Bulky, the Deep Strike, the Fearless, and you know, so on. But definitely a lot of comparisons with these have made it across to the 40k rules. The Land Raider nowadays in 8th edition is way more expensive than the 275 points you see there. It's actually 350 points. However, the Venerable Contemptor Dreadnought is a little bit cheaper than this one. And in the Sisters of Silence book, you had, I think again, 3 or probably 4, 3 or 4. Yeah, just the 4 data sheets. They gave them the different types of squads: the Prosecutor Squad, the Vigilator Squad, the Witch Seeker Squad, and the Null Maiden Rhino. So it gave them a Rhino for you to transfer them all about in. I do like the gold colour scheme though, well, for both. Now, one of the main reasons why I've delayed in the codexes and things like that is because of the obvious fact that there are YouTubers out there that have similar number of subscribers that get sent codexes early and for free. I just can't compete with that. There's just no way. I spend my own money on all of the things that are featured in the channel. I'm not sponsored, and I have the same access to them as everybody else. So that's why I kind of have refrained from the codex reviews and things as of late, because I feel that people have already, you know, seen the review and seen first looks and things like that. But by all means, I'd love to cover every single release. I really would, don't get me wrong. So now you know a bit more about the Adeptus Custodes. They've really in their full swing last year with all the Forge World releases, and there are still a few more releases for the faction to come out, but predominantly the full force, the full range is out there. So if we have a look in the book, it will run you at 80 pages. So it's a small codex. It's you know, under 100 pages. It's one of my smallest codexes that I have. The Death Guard Codex is about 104 pages. Tyranid Codex is a whopping 125. Even the Chaos Demons Codex is 136 pages. Even the Adeptus Mechanicus Codex, which, let's face it, does have the Scutari and the Occult Mechanicus, sort of both codexes in there, is over 100 pages too. So it's definitely one of the smallest codexes. It's going to be really interesting to see with these new Knight models, the Armiger and things like that, how big the new Knight book will be. I've got a funny feeling it's going to be a similar number of pages to this. Might be a little bit less, but we'll see. So it starts you off with an introduction. Essentially, Custodian Guard, they are the Emperor's bodyguard. Very much more active in Horus Heresy, or, you know, the 31st millennium. In story-wise, we're at the 41st millennium now, so we're 10,000 years ahead. And they accompanied him through the Great Crusade, but unfortunately failed for the first time when the Emperor was mortally slain, in a way, and had to be sat upon the Golden Throne, and has remained there for the past 10,000 years. And so for the last 10,000 years, they've still been very active. There is a timeline, and it goes through some of the battles and the way in which the Custodes have thwarted attempts to get into the palace and all the rest of it. But they've pretty much been stoically guarding the palace on Terra, which in fluff-wise is in the Himalayas. But now with the arrival of Rubute Gilliman being brought out of stasis, now being the Avenging Sun, the only sort of thought to be living Primarch. Obviously the Lion is chilling out somewhere, and Khan is, and you know, all the rest of it, but still at the moment, but he's the main one that's active in everyone's eyes. Custodian Guard have now started leaving Terra, so there are 10,000 of them. So I'd say, you know, bigger than a chapter, but definitely not as big as some of the Space Marine legions that were in the Great Crusade. But 10,000's, you know, still a pretty large amount for a bodyguard. They've started leaving Terra and joining with the Indomitus Crusade. We pick up the pace 100 years into that. It's closing to an end, and that's why you're getting sort of named heroes and characters again, like Trajan Valoris and people like that. So it goes on with the introduction. It's got some. It's accompanied by some beautifully new artwork that incorporates the new models, like the jet bikes. You know, they've had a year or two to, you know, draw these up and paint them. There are some older artworks. I mean, that's a newer one from one of the newer novels, and that's an older piece of artwork there with the Emperor himself. There's a nice image of Constantine Valdor. That sort of looks like before he had all of his bling. I mean, if you look at the model that's coming out, £60 from Forge World, I think it's amazing. I really do. Another Golden Warrior wouldn't suffice. You needed somebody or something, a model sculpted that just stood out from, you know, normal Golden Warriors. And just at present, that one doesn't in that state. But the model that they're releasing does. Another famous bit of artwork, well, a blend of old and new, basically. It explains a fair bit of fluff there, the defences of Terra. So now we're into this new era of Primaris Space Marines, of Sisters of Silencer coming forward again, Adeptus Custodes and Knights, and of course Rubute Gilliman. So you've got a nice table here of the Custodes deployments, with the Shield Captain being at the top of a company. You've got Custodian Guards, Vexilis Praetors, Terminators and Virtus Praetors. I mean, there is some kind of structure. They're more lions than wolves. You know, they operate very independently as a fighting force, as an individual, rather than as a squad, which is what the Space Marines do. It's a great strength of Space Marines, but it's also a weakness, and there's pros and cons for this type of makeup too. It's nice because it goes through their uniform and their heraldry, and it goes through the different factions within the 10,000. So you've got the Shadow Keepers, Aquila Shield, Dread Host, Solar Watch. I really like their white and gold colour scheme. Emissaries Imperatus. I also like the Shadow Keepers too. So I like both of the white and the black and the gold colour schemes. Talk to you about the Solar Fastness and then the Tale of the 10,000. So it goes through many years, including the War of the Beasts, which is this big kind of orc invasion of the whole galaxy. Not that long after the Horus Heresy, to be fair, and that was one of the closest times, other than the Horus Heresy, where the Imperium was nearly smashed out of all existence. The timeline just continues. Another lovely bit of artwork against the orcs, against Deathbringer, and you've got Captain General Trajan Valora. So you've got the individual story or fluff sections of the units. So he's now the chief custodian, first of the 10,000. You've got shield captains, the custodians themselves, which include the normal custodian guard, the wardens, and the Alaris custodians. Basically, custodian guard, they're rank and file infantry, but let's face it, they're not really rank and file. They're only rank and file because most of the custodian guard force consists of them. Then you've got the wardens, which are more veterans than custodian guard. These are the guys that have obviously held watch. That they've just stood there and held watch for over 100 years. That's just incredible when you think about it. And then Alaris Terminators are the shock and awe units, but they don't really receive that much of a benefit for being in this Terminator armour, which I always thought was a bit bizarre, but it makes sense because the Auramite sort of armour itself is incredibly resilient, but in game terms they pretty much only get an extra wound. And then the Vexilis Praetors, they're the custodian guard that have this lovely Vexilla that really helps boost the morale and effectiveness, has different abilities for the force, and you can pick which one you want. The Virtus Praetors, they're the new unit for the force. They're essentially on these Dawn Eagle jet bikes, and you can have them with Hurricane Bolters, which aren't that special or unique. Hurricane Bolters have been around for over 20 years on Land Raider Crusaders, but they're now just on jet bikes. But you can have the salvo launcher, and their spears are pretty decent too. They're a very fast unit, effective, and they're decent at a wide range. The only downside is their numbers, which is reflected with the Custodian Guard army as a whole. Talks a little bit about the Dreadnoughts, and it goes on to explain a little bit about Shield Captain Hastorius Calaxor, how he's promoted to Shield Captain, fell in the battle, but survived through sheer will and was interred into a Contemptor Dreadnought. If you've read Master of Mankind, there's a Custodes in the Contemptor Dreadnought in that too, and I really recommend you read Master of Mankind. It's an incredible book, and not only does it cover Custodian Guard, it has a bit of Arkan Land as well, who, moving on, tedious link to Land Raiders. Yeah, Custodian Guard, it just goes to show you how good Land Raiders are in the 41st millennium, that Custodian Guard use them as their sort of main troop transport. Yes, the beta rules show that you can have the Coronis, and Coronis grav tanks, or grav tanks in general, were more abundant in the Horus Heresy, but they've kind of, I say, fallen back. They've chosen this as their main transport nowadays. Gives you a little bit of a showcase for all the heavy metal team's paintwork, which is of course stunning. They've even got a Contemptor and a Land Raider, but this Contemptor, they've added some ribbons from the Vexilla and the wings from the Vexilla as well, if you wanted to use that Dreadnought for the army. Another bit of a showcase showing the different units. So you've got some jet bikes in the background, you've got the Wardens and a Shield Captain, and you've got some normal Custodian Guard. Likewise here, you've got a nice Shield Captain without a helmet, and an example of the Solar Watch and the Shadow Keepers, and Dread Host as well, and Emissaries Imperatus. So you've got 4 different factions there from earlier on in the Codex. You've got them going up against insurmountable odds, including a Stomper and a Wasbomb Blaster Jet. And then you've got the Virtus Praetors themselves, equipped with the Hurricane Bolters there, and then you've got one with the Salvo Launcher. You've got more of a showcase here with the Alaris Terminators, so it really does, and the Contemptor Dreadnought. So it really does cover every sort of avenue there, starting off with Trajan Valoris. The Eagle Vigilance, so this is like a little selection of how you can build up your army of Custodian Guard. And this force here, Maths Cats just rushed in the room and blurted out 600 points. So this little force here will cost you, give or take a few, about 600 points, which is, you know, a huge amount of points for 6 models, you know, averaging 100 points per model. 6 models, 600 points. Cost-wise as well, this is only going to cost you £70 maximum. You know, £35 for the 5 Custodian Guard and £35 for the Dreadnought, if you want to do it that way. So £70 gets you a 600 point army. It's a very expensive but cheap army at the same time. What I mean by that is it's expensive that a squad of 5 will cost you £35, but that squad of 5 can be a squad of 3 with an HQ and an elite choice. So all of the box sets are very flexible in that way. The Virtus Praetor box set, you can use one of them as a shield captain, but then you can't really use the other 2, or you can have 3 Virtus Praetors. This Custodian Guard squad I've just mentioned, same as the Warden set, which costs the same 35, and similar to the Alaris Terminators. But the Alaris Terminators, again, if you have one as a shield captain, you forgo the other 2. It's pretty much, you have to use 2 of them as a Vixilis Praetor and a shield captain, and then get another set. If you're conservative about the whole thing, you could get a box of these, a Dreadnought, and a box of Wardens and a Land Raider, and you're good to go. I mean, you're good to go with just these 6 models for 600 points. A low model count army, very elite, very high points cost, but they're not a glass hammer by any means. They have huge damage output, a lot of resilience and survivability. Their downside, obviously, is their manoeuvrability, unless you're using the Virtus Praetors, and capturing and holding objectives. So just bear that in mind. And here's another example of a huge force this time. You've got a squad of Virtus Praetors, you've got a few squads of Custodian Guard, you've got a couple of squads of Wardens, Trajan Valoris, a shield captain, a huge squad of 5 Alaris Terminators, another Vixilis Praetor, and a couple of Contemptors and a Land Raider as well. So that's a huge force, and that's pretty much all you'll ever need just there to play many games with. Yes, you can go the full force and, you know, get 3 squads of Terminators or 3 squads of jet bikes. It really depends on you and your play style and who you're up against. The Army of Terror. So a little bit of a showcase there again. And then we get into the data sheets. I said it in the first look, I do think that there should have been a picture of Trajan Valoris there, or even there, and have his data sheet there. I don't really see the importance of that. More and more I see all these codexes trying to be, or trying to kind of mimic the Forge World books, in that you just have the information about the unit on the page and you don't have anything else. But I think it's important, and I much prefer having a picture of the model or unit on there, so I can look at it while I'm looking at the rules and the models. And it's also good for newcomers if you just get this book and you don't know what Trajan Valoris looks like, or you don't know what Alaris Terminators look like, just to have a little picture of it or them. And I think that's one of the main positives of all the codexes. I'm not a big fan of sort of progress for progress's sake. To me, it's a bit of a step back when you're, you know, taking something else. I'm all for change if that change is in the right direction. Let's go through all of the units. So Captain General Trajan Valoris, power points cost of a 10. And like all the other codexes, you go to the back and you've got the match play points values. He's his own separate named character. He's the only named character in the book, and it will cost you 250 points. So he's a Land Raider in old money, if you want to say that. Very strong character, is very weak in terms of deployment. I won't go on to the stratagems just because there are so many. There are, you know, 3 pages of stratagems with all the command points. If that's something that you're really interested in, go to a Games Workshop store, have a look at them and see which ones work for you. There are stratagems that do allow you to teleport in infantry, bike or dreadnought units from your army by using the command points. There are stratagems that allow you to re-roll failed wound rolls, and so on. I won't go into depth with those, but if they are something that's important to you, definitely go into the Games Workshop store and have a look at them and see which works. So he's a movement of 6 inches, which is pretty much the same as most of the units in this book. His weapon skill, ballistic skills 2+, strength 5, toughness 5. You'll see a lot of that in this book. He's got 7 wounds, which is astronomical. 5 attacks, leadership 10 and a save of 2+. He's got an Auramite halo. It's that good. It's not just a normal halo that chaplains have and captains have that give them 4+ invulnerable. He's got an Auramite one which gives him a 3+ invulnerable. So you've got a 2+ normal, 3+ invulnerable. His Watcher's Axe deals 2 damage, strength 5 for shooting, and in melee it times his strength by 2, so he's hitting on a strength 10 and it's AP -3. You can re-roll hit rolls and wound rolls of a 1 for anyone around him that's 6 inches, and he's got the moment shackle, which allows him to regain up to 3 lost wounds during the phase, but you can only use that once per battle. He can pile in and attack an additional time, and also regain up to D3 command points spent when you use a stratagem. So yeah, it goes back to the stratagems that he will complement those 2. Then you've got shield captains, and they come in 3 flavours. You've got the standard shield captain on foot. You've got one in some Alaris Terminator armour, which gives him 1 more wound, and that ballistus grenade launcher, which is amazing. But the normal shield captain is a very good choice, very strong HQ choice. If you didn't want to use Valoris, you can give him a storm shield, so he can get a 3+ invulnerable. You can give him an axe, a sentinel blade, and so on. Very strong, solid unit. 6 wounds, toughness 5. The Alaris Terminator, he's got the 7 wounds. The ballistus grenade launcher is possible 3 shots, and it's assault 3 as well, with an AP of -3, which is going to be a surprise for your opponent, and he can teleport. Then the one on the Dawn Eagle jet bike, yes, it's expensive at almost 200 points, but he can whip around with his 7 wounds and his 2+ save and his 5+ invulnerable. Whipping around at 14 inches is going to be a real pain in the opponent's side. Then troops. You've only got 1 troops choice in the whole book, and that's just the Custodian Guard. In the Horus Heresy book Inferno, you split them, ones with sentinel blades and ones with spears, and you also had a separate unit that had the laser beams of death, otherwise known as Adrathic Destructors. They're sort of versions of bolters but with death rays that were completely banned by the Emperor, and only he had them. But in this book, 1 troop choice, and that is the Custodian Guard. Very solid, good movement, strength 5, toughness 5, 3 wounds each, 3 attacks. You can have up to 10 of them in a squad, but 3 of them will still hold their own. It's basically having 9 wounds there. Save of 2+, 5+ invulnerable. You give them sentinel shields. You got a solid force there of 2+ normal and 3+ invulnerable, with the sentinel blades that can do AP -3, which is the same as the Guardian Spear, so just bear that in mind. But they just lack a little bit of range in shooting. So a squad of 5 of these guys in a Coronis, speeding its way to your opponent, is going to do an awful lot of damage. Then we're on to the elite section, quite a hotly contested section in here, because you've got Custodian Wardens, which are, you know, veteran Custodian Guard, basically. They have a better leadership and more attacks. They've got the same number of wounds, same strength and toughness. They do have access to the Castellan axes though, so it seems like you've got to really serve the time to get access to these axes, which add +3 to your strength. Worse for spears for armor penetration, but it does bump their strength up to 8. And also they can ignore any failed wounds on a 6. Lexilis Praetor, don't leave home with your Custodian Guard force without one. Strongly recommend taking one in your force, because they come with a multitude of buffs, everything from adding 1 to the attack characteristics, giving Imperium infantry a 5+ invulnerable save, and also subtracting 1 from hit rolls in the shooting phase from enemy models. So that's going to improve their survivability even more. You have one of these with some Custodian Guard that have storm shields, and the enemy's having to take 1 away from shooting at them. Then if they do get through, if it's a high strength weapon, they've got 3+ invulnerable saves, or 2+ normal saves. It really does, you know, a Vexilis Praetor, whether he's in Terminator armor or just your normal, you know, Auramite armor, is going to do incredibly well. There's the standard one too, the Vexilis Praetor. Speaking of the Terminators, you've got the Alaris Custodians. They're in Terminator armor. They've got a couple of benefits from your normal Custodian Guard. One being 1 extra wound, which is 1 more than the Wardens as well. And they've got 4 attacks. They've got the same save. They get the 2+ normal and 5+ invulnerable. They can teleport in, and they do have those ballistic grenade launchers, which you've got 3 of them, and that's the minimum squad size. You can have up to 9 shots at AP -3, which is going to be a real surprise to an opponent. And they're great at singling out an enemy character and consolidating to them. And then the final unit in the elite choice is the Venerable Contemptor Dreadnought. Of course, that's changed slightly now because of the beta rules. You can take a Contemptor Achilles Dreadnought or a Contemptor Exemplar Dreadnought, whatever one of those things is. But it's essentially a Contemptor Dreadnought. It has exactly the same profile, but it just has 2 Dreadnought close combat weapons and Lastrum Stormbolter. So it basically just has 2 power fists. Forge World haven't made a model for that yet. I suppose you could sort of make it out of the Telemon Dreadnought, but that's a bigger Dreadnought with you know, better characteristics. And it says at the moment you can represent it with another Contemptor Dreadnought model. So that's pretty cool. Back to this one though. It's an elite choice. Single model. It is slightly more expensive than your Space Marine Contemptor Dreadnought, in the sense that it has a better save. It's now got a save of 2+. It still has its 5+ invulnerable, but it has the Unyielding Ancient, so it can, you know, ignore wounds on a 6, and I think that's worth it. You know, same movement speed and all the rest of it, so it is faster than your standard 6-inch you know, troops and other elites in this book. Fast attack, the one and only choice in this book, but there is beta rules for the Caladius grav tank with the Iliastus accelerator cannons, which is also a fast attack choice, and that's a good anti-tank weapon too. But the only fast attack choice in this codex, the Virtus Praetors, 15 power points, gets you the 3 jet bikes. They're very fast, fastest unit in the book at 14 inches, and they're the same speed as a Coronis grav tank. They're very solid again. They have a better toughness than your normal Custodian Guard, toughness 6, and they have 1 more wound with 4, and they do have 4 attacks other than the 3 for the normal Custodian Guard. You can mix and match their equipment, but essentially you can give them Hurricane Bolters or the new salvo launchers, which you can have melter missiles or flak burst missiles, and the interceptor lances just adds an extra 1 to the strength. Would have been nice if it was 2 or 3. Where they beat the Guardian Spear is that you can re-roll failed wound rolls for the weapon, but at strength 6 that's a nice little bonus, and you can advance them even further with adding the 6 inches to the movement characteristics if you want to make them advance with the implacable Vanguard ability. And then finally, the only heavy support in this codex, although if you use the beta rules on the website you can choose a Coronis instead. Coronis carries more, has more wounds, but doesn't have a better save, but it does have an invulnerable save and can ignore damage as well, but is more expensive, slightly more expensive than the Venerable Land Raider. And it really depends on whether you want a better save by picking the Land Raider and better anti-tank capability with the, you know, the 4 strength 9 shots, to forego 1 extra Custodian Guard that it can carry, that a Coronis can carry. This can carry 5, Coronis can carry 6. It's unfortunate this doesn't have an invulnerable save of any kind, like a 6 or something like that, but it's still a very, very solid choice, if expensive. You know, you're talking 350 match play points for one of these, but it is going to last a long time with its high toughness and its decent normal save and its ability to ignore failed wounds. You can carry your 5 Custodian Guard or Wardens or whoever in this, moving forward, your 10 inches a turn. So another solid choice there. Armory of the Adeptus Custodes. The Codex just explains the ranged weapons in their profiles and the melee weapons. Bit of another sort of showcase there. Auric Mortalis, which is something I sort of overlooked when I first created my first look video for the Codex. It's odd that they keep this sort of hidden in the back. I would have preferred it right at the front. What I mean by that is probably right here with Aegis of the Emperor. I just think it could go there, but hey. In the abilities, if the army is battle forged, so all of your units are Custodian Guard, all infantry and biker units gain Sworn Guardians and Emperor's Chosen. So Emperor's Chosen means units invulnerable save is improved by 1 to a maximum of 3+. So yeah, you don't get your Sentinel Blade and Storm Shield Custodian squad with a 2+ invulnerable save. That's maximum 3+. So it means that most of the army is going to have a nice 4+ invulnerable if you just use them, which is pretty insane when you think about it. You've got a whole army there, 4+ invulnerables. However, you can't use that with the Contemptor Dreadnought there. It's only biker and infantry units, and Sworn Guardians helps with the sparse number of models with controlling objective markers. Stratagems, I already said I'm not going to go heavily into detail with those. But if they are a big thing for you and the way you play your army, then by all means go into Games Workshop's store and just have a gander at them before you pick up the cards. Relics of Terror. So there's some very nice, powerful and esoteric weapons available there. Warlord traits there, some very decent ones. Instead of a 6, you get a 5+ for ignoring the wounds, things like that. Points values, I've said before, Captain General Trajan Valoris has his own little profile for 250 points. Quite straightforward to follow and work out. And then finally you've got some tactical objectives there as well at the end. So yes, it is a short codex, 80 pages. It is a short codex, £25 for 80 pages. I would have preferred it to be £20, I really would. I think that would have been better, and that goes with what I've been saying before, that codexes that are under 100 pages I think should be 20, and any more than 100, yeah, 25. Anyway, that is my review of this codex. This video has probably taken me over an hour today to make. So as always, I want to say a huge thank you to my Patreons, helping me support the channel and funding all the things I buy for it to give you the first looks and the reviews of as many things as I can possibly get. And I want to say thank you to all you subscribers, you new subscribers, old subscribers, and all the viewers as well. If you can, leave a comment. Tell me what your thoughts are of the Adeptus Custodes. Would love to hear from you. In summary, I think they're everything and more that I'd hoped for. Yes, they are a very small elite army, but they're great for newcomers too. They sort of remind me of Space Marines when I first ever got into Space Marines. You know, Space Marines didn't have many tanks, they didn't have many elites or troops even. It's kind of like a second coming for me for Space Marines. That's the way I've viewed this as. But they're highly elite. You only need a small force, so it saves on the cost of making an army. They're relatively straightforward to put together and to paint. You just need to put them together, spray them gold, maybe shade them with flesh shade, dry brush them with gold again, and just pick out some details. They're quite straightforward. A great start in army too. It means you can get an army on the battlefield relatively quickly, and you won't get into the pitfall that many of us do, where we buy models and before we've even painted them, we'll get more models to add to armies. Really looking forward to the official sort of rules moving forward onto the beta rules that they've released. I can't wait to use more of my 30k models from Forge World in 40k. Looking forward to that. Thank you ever so much for joining me today. Thank you for watching. The Emperor protects.